On this episode, we're talking about human resources, fractional CHRO officers, compliance, and strategic risk for companies, and what organizations can do to better manage their employees and managers through the HR function. All this and more coming up. I'm Dr. Bill Sodeman, and we're on the perfect route. Welcome to the show. I am so pleased to have Barry Cohn with me today. How are you, Barry?
I am great today, and I'm honored to be on your podcast. Thank you.
It's a privilege to have you here sharing your background, which is quite extensive in HR. Could you tell our listeners and viewers a little more about yourself and your company?
Well, I'm the CEO, and I call myself the chief HR guy at Jorgensen HR. I actually started an HR company about 14 years ago, and 7 years ago, I bought Jorgensen HR. And then 3 years ago, I bought two more HR firms, Quad County HR and Strategies for HR. So Jorgensen, we're in our 43rd year, and we do everything HR.
Fantastic. That's quite a track record. And I can't wait to hear some of what you've learned over the years. I worked in HR for about 7 years as a corporate learning executive. And of course, I taught as a management professor, still do I've done that for many years as well. I'm interested in what drew you into the world of HR and how's your perspective on that HR changed over time?
Well, that's a great question. My path into HR was not traditional at all. I started in banking for 25 years in the middle market. I worked with manufacturers and distributors. I ended up managing a group of 20 bankers, and I had a $3 million loan authority. And then I guess today that would be 8 or 9 million I could just approve with my own signature. And the bottom line is that I had reached a stage in banking where I needed to make a move. And being a man, of course, I looked at my banking background, not my skill set. My wife said, "Why don't you come join my employee benefits company?" And her company was 3 years old. She had been with Blue Cross of California for 16 years. And then she started her own agency. And of course, I said, "I don't think so, dear." But 6 months later, we ended up doing it. We met with four other couples that were in business for themselves, husbands and wives, and said, how do we separate family from business? And we had just Brady bunched our kids, and we had 5 kids, and they were like 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11. So I joined my wife's company. At that time, she had about 20 employer groups as clients. And we grew it for 20 years and ended up at 450 groups, 1,000 Medicare, 600 individual health insurance policies. But what happened was when you're working with employers, they start asking you HR questions. And the HR questions are easy to answer, but the problem was our E&O insurance would not permit us to answer H&R questions. HR questions. So I started an HR firm about 14 years ago, and we got E&O insurance, and we started answering questions. But while we were doing benefits, Jorgensen HR was doing HR, and we had mutual clients. We probably had 10 mutual clients out of 450. Learned that Linda Harris wanted to sell her company 8 years ago, and we decided to buy it. So 7 years ago, we bought Jorgensen HR. And my perspective is that early on, HR was viewed more administratively and reactive. Today, HR is more a strategic driver of business success, impacting culture, risk management, growth, and ultimately the bottom line. And HR has become a partner with senior management and business owners, not just a stepchild.
Okay. The strategic partner piece is so important. That's something I learned in my previous role as an executive, because I remember the days when HR was called personnel.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it was more about record keeping and intake. And when there were separations, we didn't call it outboarding. It was a very different world.
Yeah. And now we have onboarding, offboarding, leave of absence management, a whole bunch of things that HR didn't do 30 years ago. But more importantly, it's due to labor law changes and regulations. I'm in California, and most of our clients are headquartered in California, although we work nationally, and we have clients in about 10 different states. Labor laws keep increasing every year, and HR has to help make sure that companies are compliant and don't open themselves up to lawsuits. So it's gotten complicated and much more complex in the last 5 to 10 years.
Definitely has, especially in California, where there seem to be more laws regarding HR than anywhere else in the country.
That is definitely true. And every year there's new HR laws. And last year there was 12 new HR laws in California and 10 court cases that affected employers. The court cases could be national. One was a Supreme Court case, but it was like 20 new things that employers had to know. And the question is, how do business owners of small and medium companies even figure out what they need to know? And larger companies that have HR departments, if there's 3 or 4 or 5 people in HR, they don't have time to keep up with everything. So it's very complex now.
It is. And I think that's one of the reasons why companies rely so much on firms like yours is that, unless you've got the scale to have an in-house HR department, it's difficult to keep up. And even then, you need to run to the outside to ask questions and get help.
Yeah, I can give you 2 quick examples. Our largest client's headquartered in Portland. They own 250 Burger Kings, Popeye Fried Chickens. They have 4,000 employees. They have an HR department of 5 or 6 people, but they don't have time to do everything they need to do. So we have written employee handbooks for them in 4 states. We've helped them with other projects because they don't have time to do the projects. And that's one example. Another example is a bank that's headquartered in California but has
Mhm.
1,000 employees. It was a merger a couple years ago of 2 banks, so now they're much larger. And we did handbooks for them a few years ago. We did HR audit a couple years ago, and we're going to be starting a new HR audit on procedures and policies in all the locations, in all the departments to make sure they're all compliant with labor law. And they have an HR department of like 8, 9 people,
Mm.
but they just don't have time to do everything. We help larger companies with projects and small and medium-sized companies with fractional HR support.
And HR is a service function, so that means that it may not look busy when it's not busy, but if you don't have enough support inside the company and things get hectic, people feel it.
Definitely. Definitely. And there's a public company that 2 years ago asked us to do an I-9 audit. So we had to review I-9 forms for 1,500 employees. You would think that a company that does over 500 million in revenue and does work for the federal government defense, that they would have their act together when it comes to I-9s. We reviewed 1,500 I-9s and found that half of them had errors in them.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And because of those errors, if they got audited by a couple different agencies, they could lose their contracts.
Hmm.
And so we came in and audited them first, found all the errors, and then the question was, "You want us to fix it?" And they decided to fix it themselves, and hopefully they did the right thing. But the immigration services, when they do I-9 audits, they'll tell you if it's 62% of the time they find errors.
62%.
Yeah. And it could be as simple as forgetting to sign a space on one of the lines. It could be writing down the wrong ID. It could be transposing letters in a birth date or a hire date. But all those are violations and they involve fines. So
That gives me shudders. The amount of detail work involved in processing what from the employee side seems like a simple form and another hurdle to onboarding, but
yeah, it's a simple form. You have to show documents, either a passport or a driver's license and another ID. And you just have to acknowledge that you saw that and date it and put down the number of what you saw. And they can't get things right.
wow. And that can be a real struggle, not only with I-9s, but there are other forms and other procedures that need audit and carry
Mhm.
some risk for the organization.
Yeah. And if you'd like another example of that, when you hire a new employee in California and you offer health insurance, there's 20 to 22 different notices, brochures, forms you have to give them when you hire them.
Mhm.
Inevitably, if we do an audit, everything's not correct. Something's missing or items are missing. And we do HR audits for private equity firms when they're going to buy a company to see what skeletons might be in the closet. We do audits for companies when we start working with them to make sure they're doing things right. And then the thing about the documents and pamphlets and everything is they could be updated. So every December, we have a new hire package, and every December we'll go online to each of the agencies, federal and state. And state, it's more than one. It's just not like Department of Labor, the Industrial Relations Department, the Civil Rights Department. There's 3 or 4 different ones. And we'll look at every single document and make sure they haven't been updated. And if they've been updated, then we will let our clients know that these are the new forms for 2026 or 2027 or what have you. A company with 30 employees, 60, 100, they don't have time to check all that. And if they got audited and there's something wrong, especially if they get a lawsuit, it could be a major issue for them.
It is, as I mentioned earlier, significant risk to the company.
Hmm.
And to me, that's one reason why HR needs to be a strategic partner and have a seat at the table.
I agree 100%. There's areas in HR. I mean, we do tactical things like employee handbooks, new hire packages, absences. There's operational items such as organizational design, leadership coaching, planning for growth of employees. And then there's strategic, which is organizational design of the company and the HR functions and employee relations issues and how that happens and performance management policies. So there's a whole bunch of different things and we look at those three areas: tactical, operational, strategic, and try to make sure our clients are up to date and compliant in all those areas.
Okay. Okay. Speaking of strategy, is there another example that you could provide of, how HR captures the strategic potential for a client?
Yeah, I think there is. I'll give some thought to that. We were
Okay.
brought in a couple years ago to a hospital with 800 employees. They had fired their HR person, and they wanted us to come in, 3 to 6 months till they hired a new person. We were in there for 14 months. And we took over director of HR and we oversaw HR for the whole hospital. And strategically, what we did was we went in and we conducted an HR audit. We identified major compliance gaps. One of the major gaps was leave of absences processes. They had about 60 people on leave of absences at that time out of 800 employees, which was large. And we went in, we gave them 24 hours a week with an HR consultant. And we basically looked at how they handle leave of absences and reorganized it with all the legal documents. When you have a leave of absence in California, you have to have an interactive dialogue with that employee before they go on a leave of absence and after they come back from a leave of absence. And well, that's strategic. That's, your employees, if they're going out on leave of absences and they really shouldn't because it's not really a leave, they don't have the correct medical certification, for example. So we had basically helped them reorganize that whole department, and then they finally hired somebody, and they ended our assignment with them or our job with them. But the CEO said, "Hey, I really enjoyed what you did, and we'll come back." And since subsequent to that, in the last 2 years, we've had two workplace investigations.
Hmm.
One we just completed a few weeks ago because he trusts what we do and how we do it, and knows that we're going to do the right thing for the company or for the hospital.
Interesting. It's always startling to me just how the follow-up work happens, especially when you do the initial engagement well. And, you know, again, I'm not as nearly as familiar with California HR law as you are, but it can really trip organizations up.
Yeah. And as also other states, New York, New Jersey. I mean, we have companies that are headquartered in Arizona, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, Alaska, and California. But every company now, larger companies have multiple locations in other states and also remote employees. And I just talked to a prospective client last week. It's got 20 people in 10 different states. And my first question to them was, are you keeping up with HR laws and compliance in each of those locations? And of course, the answer was no. We're just keeping up
Hmm.
with compliance in California. Well, if leave of absences is different in Ohio or Iowa or whatever, they have to keep up with everything. So, one of the things we do for our clients is that the first of every month, actually, it was today, the 5th of the month that we got it, I get an email with every new labor law in every city, county, state, in the whole country.
Hmm.
It's a service that we subscribe to. It costs us $10,000 a year, but we have every new labor law. And then we can look at our clients and the HR consultants can give them an update on everything that's new they need to know. And then also we have another service that has to do with posters because you have to every state you have to put posters up on the walls in the company. But if you're remote, you still have to give them posters and notices. And those sometimes change in the middle of the year. So we get updates for every city, state, county, but our clients are in anytime there's a poster change. And we can provide them that information so that they're always up to date. But I think New Jersey, New York, California probably have the most complicated labor laws, but
Hmm.
other states do too. I mean, Oregon, we have lots of leave of absences in California, but Oregon has one we don't even have in California. And it's basically if you're a veteran, you get Veterans Day off
Okay.
automatically. And companies may not know that, may not know how to learn that. And then if you can't give them Veterans Day off, which I think is November 11th, because
Hmm.
of a project they're working on or a client or whatever, you have to give them any other day during the year if it's mutually agreeable. So a company that's in Oregon may not even know that. And my large franchisee in Oregon with the 4,000 employees, how does each location know that if they had a veteran or not? And all they need is
Right.
one veteran to be up, learn about it, find a plaintiff's attorney and sue them.
Hmm.
So the idea is that we try to make sure that we're mitigating risk for our clients.
Beyond some of the things that we've already discussed, what are some gaps or underdeveloped areas that you see in HR programs, and how do you identify and address those?
I think the major gap is wage and hour compliance.
Okay.
Wage and hour involves meal breaks, rest breaks, overtime, things of that nature. Meal and rest breaks are standard in every state has their own meal and rest breaks. And overtime, California is different, of course, than other states, but it could be time and a half, it could be double time. And so those are the biggest items. And so what happens is if an employee gets disgruntled and goes to find a plaintiff's attorney who sues employers, they're going to start with wage and hour items. And then they'll look at I-9s. And then they'll look at leave of absences. And they just go through a list of documents. But I'll give you an example of something. I talked to one of my key management people yesterday. She has a new prospect that has, let's see, they have 1,000 employees, have a wage and hour issue, and they would like us to pull all the wage and hour records for the last 3 years, and they pay twice a month. Well, 1,000 employees is 2,000 paychecks a month. Times 12 is 24,000 paychecks. Multiply that by three, and you're going to get 72,000 if I did that right in my head. Someone's got to look at all those wage and hour statements to make sure meal breaks were taken properly, overtime was done right, and what the possible penalty would be if they litigated it and lost the case.
Hmm.
So one of the things we do a lot of is wage and hour audits. And that could be in any number of states, but that's a key area. But generally speaking, we look at when we start working with a client, we try to do an audit either informally or formally, but there's like 25 or 30 items we look at or areas we look at. And some of it might be anything from, well, what we try to do is identify the risks and the gaps. And then we try to prioritize these are the things you got to do in the next 30 days. These are things you need to correct in the next 90 days or 6 months. Try to help him implement policies and training and solutions and provide ongoing support. But the gaps are usually wage and hour. That's number one.
Okay. So we've talked a little bit about where HR currently is. Where do you think the future of HR is going over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, everyone's talking AI. And I would tell you that
Yes.
um, the hot topic right now for large companies, I'm talking about Fortune 1,000 companies or AI. And right now, AI is already transforming companies and how they recruit and onboard employees. There's right now 4 lawsuits in the courts regarding AI in recruiting. Has to do with resume screening. They might screen 500 resumes and they move 20 of them to the company to look at. Question is, are they showing any bias in resume screening and also in onboarding and also in background checking, which could be used
Hmm.
with AI. AI is already being used all over the place, but I think that in the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to find that lower level activities will be moved into AI to save time
Hmm.
and create efficiencies. So, as an example, we do about 70 employee handbooks a year, and we create those handbooks from a template that comes from an employment law firm. They do 700 a year, handbooks. It takes us 10 to 12 hours to do a handbook. So interview the company, ask them a series of questions, and then we go to the template and we fill in the blanks. And then we check it for quality control, give a draft to the client. But it takes 10 to 12 hours of our time to create the handbook. Well, what would happen if you put the template in AI, you did the ask the questions, you filled in the blanks, and then you uploaded the answers to the questions in AI and said, fill in the blanks.
Hmm.
They could do it in probably 5 minutes or less. Then you'd have to review it to make sure it's correct, and where the blanks were filled in. And that would be everything from holidays, sick leave of absences, different things that are, change in different companies. And that would make us a lot more efficient. And I think that that's one of those kind of activities that might go. The other is leave of absence management. If someone wants to leave of absence, you have a dialogue with them, but then there's a whole bunch of leave of absence paperwork that has to be completed. Some has to be customized. And then you have to track the leave of absence based on whether a company has over 50 employees. There's Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA, and below 50 in California have something called CFRA, California Family Rights Act. And you have to monitor the time and then get back in touch with people when it's time to them to come back to work, and medical certifications that expire and all that. A lot of that low level stuff you can probably put up into AI. And as an example, well, I'll explain it this way. About 4 years ago, I started running an HR mastermind group.
Okay.
And I have 17 HR firms in the country. We meet once a month. Four are out of state, a couple in Texas, one in New York, one in Chicago. Everybody else is somewhere in California. And we talk HR, and we spend a whole couple of months on AI and HR. Anybody using it? What are you using it for? What do you think it could be used for? But where AI can't help is when you have two employees not getting along, and you have to
Mm.
sit each one down and discuss what the issue is, help them with communication skills. And we got a new assignment coming up with 20 managers in a 120 person company, and the managers aren't getting along. They're yelling and screaming at each other. That's what the HR person told me. And so they want us to do a training in communication styles, supervisory management, kind of do a case study where groups of five, they're working together, and then give them feedback. And you can't do that in AI. So there's some higher level things we do that you really can't use it. But AI is going to change the whole landscape in the near future.
Yeah, it's definitely affecting workflows. And then there's agentic AI, which gives people opportunities to interact with the AI in different ways.
So our employee handbooks now have an AI section, and
Hmm.
it gives the employer the ability to say, yes, you can use AI if you're an employee any way you want, or yes, you can use AI, but these are the restrictions, or no, you can't use AI at all. And in my company, my HR consultants cannot use AI at all,
Okay.
because there's too much risk. If you ask a question into AI and you put a client's name or private information or confidential information, you can get yourself into trouble. Paychex, the big payroll company, has a $10 million lawsuit right now because somebody in the back office in payroll did something with AI and a bunch of data got out. I use AI outside of our company's computer system. We're in the cloud and AWS, Amazon Web Services. Everything's in the cloud and protected and private. So I don't use AI there, but I use AI for marketing purposes. I write blog articles and we send out 2 to 4 articles a month for companies to get updates on anything that's happening in HR regulations or labor law. But I'll use AI to help me polish my article and help me get a much better article than I would do otherwise.
Okay.
So I do use it, but I think all the firms in my mastermind group, we're talking right now about how we're going to put handbooks up into AI in the next 12 months.
Interesting. It's certainly a low hanging fruit opportunity.
hmm Yeah. And then the question becomes, if we're doing 10 to 12 hours now and we charge X dollars, what happens if AI shortens that time to 4 hours? How do we charge for that? And how do we price it based on the hours involved and the time involved of an HR consultant? Or do
Mm.
you change
Yeah, that's an interesting point right there.
it?
Any closing thoughts for our viewers and listeners on where you think HR is going or where we are right
Well,
now?
Yeah, I have one thought, and that is that, we work with companies with 25 to, I'm sorry, back that, 25 employees to 500. That's like our sweet spot. So the companies under 100, they don't really have HR. And so fractional HR helps them. So we're continuing to expand our fractional HR model because more companies are realizing they don't need full-time HR people, but they need to have the right level of expertise so they don't get themselves into trouble and get lawsuits. So we see HR becoming even more integrated in overall business strategies in the next few years. Workforce planning, organizational design, leadership development, company culture, employee engagement. And so we're helping clients in all those areas to help them grow their employees, reduce turnover, retain employees based on the fact that the employees like working for the company. Employees don't leave for money. They leave for two major reasons. Either they don't like their bosses, which is very common, or they don't see a path for growth and improvement because they seem to just they get to a level and then that's as far as they can go in the company.
Mhm.
So there's now tools you can use to survey how people are in the company and where they think they want to go and where they're at now and whether they're frustrated or not and things of that nature. But Jorgensen HR, we work now with about 350 employer groups, um, and we're adding a few every single month. Our goal is to add, I think it's 36 a year, 3 a month, and half of that's fractional HR versus projects. So that's kind of where we're heading.
Okay. Yeah, there's definitely a move to fractional across the executive spectrum. And with HR, it's particularly challenging, I would think, just because there are times when it would benefit a company to have a full-time HR person on board, especially when they're facing a great deal of organizational change, for example.
Exactly. And I think part of the challenge for companies is that most HR consulting firms are very small.
Hmm.
There's thousands of sole practitioners around the country. And then there's small companies with 2 to 4 people or 5 to 8 people. And the problem with those HR firms are they can't keep up with everything because they're helping their clients and therefore they don't have time to keep up with what's going on. I have 20 people. I have 16 HR consultants. And they don't have to keep up on labor law because we do it for them and then we give them the information. So I'm like the labor law guru. I read everything labor law. I'm a
Hmm.
sponge. And then every month we talk about all the new labor law updates with our consultants. And I know that in my HR mastermind group, the firms that are larger but have 17, 20, 22 people, they are much better at handling the HR challenges for companies than the real small ones, especially the sole practitioners. Because if you're handling 4 clients and you're working 40 hours a week, you don't have
Hmm.
time to find new clients. And then you don't have time to pick up on labor law and read everything you need to read. And it's complicated.
It is. Yeah, it's definitely a wild world.
Yeah, it
Um,
definitely is.
yeah. If our viewers and listeners want to get a hold of you or find out more information, where should they go?
Well, our website is jorgensenhr.com, and that'll show you everything we do HR wise and how we help our clients, and some testimonials are there too. My email address is Barry at jorgensenhr.com, jorgensenhr.com. And our general phone number is 6, and that will be answered by Jessica, and she could route somebody wherever they need to go.
Excellent. Thanks for being with us today, Barry. We learned a lot, and it was just a pleasure to talk with you today.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor being on your podcast. I listened to a number of your podcasts before I agreed to do this, and I hope that we're being helpful to the viewers or listeners of the podcast so they can do a better job running their companies.
Excellent. Excellent. And for the viewers and listeners out there, thanks for joining us today, and come back to us for another episode of The Perfect Route.